right. I'm going to be, in a way, following up with Frank's excellent talk from the perspective of once you've gotten the patient at the site, once you've gotten the trial up and running, to make sure that the patient actually takes their medicine, because it doesn't matter if they don't take their medicine. So I'm Anthony McKinney, as she said earlier. I'm the founder of Ethismos Research. I got to this point by successfully selling my company, Neurovance, to Otsuka. So as we go through this talk, look at it from the perspective of the little company having had a success, and the patients actually taking their medicine played an important role. As she mentioned, I've been at this for a fair amount of time. I spent the first 5 years of my career in a big pharma company, and then went to biotech about 25 years ago. So I've been in the biotech world for a very long time. I've been blessed to have 2 approvals, argatroban for heparin-induced thrombocytopenia, and Contrave for obesity. Couldn't have been 2 more different areas, one tiny, one big. So let's get started. So I'm coming at this from the perspective of a customer. I was the first biotech customer of AiCure, and they have asked for a poll. So feel free to respond to the poll. I'll give you a minute or 2. All right. I think we're getting a pattern here. That's a pretty fair estimate. That's pretty good, actually. We're going to see confirmation of this here in a minute. Okay, so I said a minute ago that my company, Neurovance, was acquired by Otsuka last year. This is for a drug for ADHD. And with luck, Frank and his colleagues will be taking it into phase 3 this year. So I acquired a company called Dove Pharmaceutical back in July of 2010, and I formed a new company called Ethismos. And the reason that Ethismos was able to acquire Dove Pharmaceutical, that had formerly been a high-flying company, it was worth at one time a couple of $2 billion, had about 40, 50 employees. But they had a really bad outcome because, let's see, they went public here. Their stock was up and down a little bit, but then it plummeted because they had 2 chronic lower back pain trials go south. This was with bicypidine, a dual reuptake inhibitor for chronic lower back pain. And it turns out later that among patients that actually took their medicine, the drug worked. So a number of people lost their jobs, a lot of investors lost their money because people didn't take their medicine. Now, on the other hand, I got an opportunity to buy a company that had gone dark, that had formerly been worth a lot of money, for $2 million. Now, we raised a whole lot of money in order to acquire them and then run a trial. But you see bad things happen when people don't take their medicine. These are press releases that talked about that negative outcome. So as you guys predicted nicely a few minutes ago, if the patient doesn't take their medicine, the trial loses power. In my world, my old world of ADHD, the threshold for good adherence is about 80%. So if you follow that 80% line, you can see that a lot of trials start out at about 73% of what they expected to be in terms of power. So right off the top, if the people don't take their medicine, you're going to lose statistical power. You can make it up, but you have to overpower your trial. Or better yet, why not ensure that people take their medicine? I'm coming at this from the perspective of having known what it feels like to fail in a trial. So at Ethismos, we acquired Dove, advanced another drug, a triple reuptake inhibitor for depression. And you see on the bottom here, with regular, everyday, uncomplicated depression, the drug worked fine at 100 milligrams with a nice p-value. However, when we took the patient acuity up to a treatment-resistant population and ran a pretty good-sized trial here with Dr. Fava's sequential parallel comparison, we were the second company to use the 6-week version. So the 6-week version of that design didn't work out that well because while the positive comparator, paroxetine 40, worked, our drug did not work. So we did a post hoc analysis and saw that we got more signal if the patient took their medicine, but we didn't get full signal. So it was clear that if we were going to use this compound for TRD, we needed to up the dose. We did see some nice changes on the CGI and saw some nice hints at efficacy, and it was certainly well tolerated, but certainly not enough to take it forward for TRD. But the point is, we know what it feels like to fail, which is an important lesson. So at this point here, I'm a biotech CEO with investors breathing down my neck. Can't have another failure. If you have another failure, I'm gone. People lose the opportunity to prove that the compound works. And so, moreover, with ADHD, we know that these people aren't that adherent. In the best of worlds, you get about 80%. And stimulants, which are standard of care today, give a little reminder because they only work when the plasma concentrations are over a certain threshold. And so when the person begins having symptoms, they know that it's time to take another dose of their med. They get a little reminder. But our drug is a non-stimulant, and it, even though we gave it twice a day, it actually works the next day. It doesn't give a notice that you need to take another dose. So we were really kind of at risk. We were in a situation where we couldn't have a failure. Otherwise, bad things happen to the little company. And we know that this population is relatively not that adherent. And we've got a non-stimulant that doesn't give a reminder like stimulants. So I knew that we needed to do something. What choices did we have? We could get electronic pill bottles. We could do pill counts. We could do the approach that the Otsuka people took, which would have cost us a lot of time, money. We'd have redone our whole program. We could have asked every patient to cooperate and be directly observed by the site. It's not necessarily that easy to do. Or we could consider this new technology AI cure. And so I was at a medical meeting, and I started having a conversation with the CEO. And it was very appealing to me. It was a technology that made a lot of sense to me. And so I reached out to my colleagues at NIAAA and NIDA, because we know, previous speaker spoke about it, that addiction patients aren't that adherent either. So it turns out that both NIDA and NIAAA had tested this device, this approach to adherence. We're very pleased with it. We're very excited by it. And so with that validation, I feel very comfortable to go forward and basically be the earliest of early adopters. And this technology actually, it accomplishes quite a lot. It not only confirms that the person ingested the investigational drug, and has shown, and they've got data, to correlate the increase in drug exposure to administering the medicine, but it actually has the ability to interact with the patient and interact with the site. So that when the patient is not cooperating, fails to take their medicine, the site can reach out. The site knows right away. And in our case, we had this system directly connected to our EDC, so we knew right away when an intervention needed to be made. And we did not have to do anything to our manufacturing process. It's outboard. It doesn't have anything to do with the manufacturing process. And there's a record of the dose administered, which turned out to be really, really important to us. We could have taken electronic pill bottles, but there's a large literature here that says that they just don't work. So again, recalling that I had a high-risk situation, I just didn't want to take that risk. We just couldn't afford that level of risk. So the AI cure system, consider it similar to not voice recognition, but visual recognition. This is a device that works through a handheld, uses the camera, but then uses computer algorithms to determine that the patient is who they are, who they say they are, and then the drug is what it is supposed to be, and that the person, when they put it in their mouth and swallow, it actually sees the motion of their swallowing. And if they're cheeking it, if they spit it out, if they move out of the visual field, it knows all that. And it's interacting. So it's really quite brilliant. If you guys have technical questions later, feel free to reach out to Adam or Stephanie. They're here in this meeting. So what did it do for us? On the right-hand side is our trial result. We had about 90% correlation with both administration and with PK values. So in other words, we had about 90% adherence. And contrast this with another trial that was running kind of at the same time, also in ADHD. These are publicly available information, and those fellows didn't use AI Cure. They didn't have a signal either. So, but we did. So we're very happy. We had good adherence, and it was a successful outcome for us. Now, you can use it in a number of different areas, and AI Cure's got data in a number of disease areas. But we know that certain patients aren't that cooperative. The addiction patient is a great example of people that they like their stipend, but they don't necessarily, they're not real good about taking their medicine. So that'd be an example of a high retention, low adherence patient. Or an early term might be a person that has low retention, high adherence. They're very cooperative, but they drop out of the trial. We know from the outset that adherence in CNS is relatively bad, but with the AI Cure system, they've had some pretty good outcomes. So you'll see it here in a few minutes with the data. And we certainly were very pleased with our outcome. They've done anticoagulation, infectious disease, a number of different schizophrenia trials, which actually I find fascinating, that these people are very cooperative with this system. ADHD and certainly healthy volunteers. And these are correlation with plasma levels and adherence. So it's pretty tight. Now, we know that patients don't always do what they're told. My policy is you trust them as far as you can throw them. And there are incidents of fraud where this technology can detect that. So if the person takes the medicine out of their mouth. They were supposed to have swallowed it, but they didn't. They're cheeking the medicine. That's classic. Or actually presenting something other than the study drug. They actually pull that one. And repeatedly leaving the view field. And so these are all incidents where the site then, they know right away, and they're going to be interacting with the patient and figure out, is this somebody that is going to be cooperative and going to be complying with the trial? These are data from a schizophrenia trial where they got about 90% adherence and evidence of drug exposure in terms of PK with their system, and then compared it against human control, human observation. Now, admittedly, it was not every single day. They did 3 of 7 days. So 4 of the 7 days, they weren't watching them. But I find it pretty fascinating, very strong data to show that this electronic nurse, so to speak, this electronic companion is getting better adherence, proven by data, shown by the PK, better than 3 of 7 days direct human observation. So this is a slide showing how the system works. So you hold the handheld, either Samsung or an iPhone, in front of you. You hold the screen so your face shows up in the screen. It identifies you through your facial features. Then you present the medicine. It confirms that in fact is the medicine. You ingest it, and the whole process takes about 15 seconds. And those data then are connected to the site via high security connections, and then the site can basically oversee the person's administration and follow up if necessary. So in a person, say in the beginning of the trial, when you're still trying to figure out who is going to be cooperative, who's not going to be cooperative, you can have a number of interventions to ensure that the person is cooperative and follows instructions and actually does what they're supposed to do. But once they've provided evidence that they can, in fact, you have faith that they're cooperating, you may loosen some of the oversight for a person that is totally compliant, and they may not have to do every single one of the fairly rigorous interventions, for example. So if a person is one of those that you're not, or this is a trial where you want to absolutely, with certainty, know that every single person took their medicine. You may have them open their mouth, confirm that their mouth is in fact without the medicine. Have them put the medicine in their mouth, have them swallow it, and then open their mouth again. Okay? Fairly intrusive sort of procedures. After they prove that they're in fact, you can trust them, you may loosen some of those interventions. So in our situation, bring it back home to where we actually use the technology, we were able to correlate the administration of the medicine with plasma PK levels. Surprisingly, the ADHD patients were totally, they got it. They enjoyed using the device. They became very used to using it. In fact, we had to adjust the dose several times in the trial, and they came to, in some ways, trust the device before they trust the site. They certainly responded quicker once the device told them what to do than when, the coordinator called them, because they're hard to reach, they don't answer the phone, but they've always got this device with them. And they did very well with it. Certainly didn't make any impact on our enrollment. It was easy to deploy. And it's really hard for me to overestimate how important these data were to us, because when it came to changing the dose quickly with safety and ensuring that every single patient took their medicine, it became so powerful for us. And so I was convinced before we ran the trial, and certainly I'm convinced afterwards. And so the next trial that I run in people not responding adequately to nicotine replacement therapy, we'll be using this platform again. So now, we have to use intent to treat, right? That's irrespective of, once a person's randomized, the FDA likes to use ITT. So this is an example of 4 patients that are all at about 90% adherence, but they're all way different. So patient A, in the 6-month trial, has cooperated well. They take their medicine on time. They're perfect. If we all had this patient A, we'd be happier in clams, right? But that's not what happens in the real world. Patient B is a person that was really quite cooperative through the first 2 or 3 months, and then something happened. They stopped taking their dose on time. They did pretty much take it generally, but they were all over the place. Patient C, they were not that great about taking their medicine on time, but then they discontinued early. Now, all of these have about 90%. So on ITT, they're all that 90% number, but they're all clearly different. And then patient D was doing great, but then they went on a drug holiday. What are you going to, that's just, well, you guys know. It's not good. But they did come back, but still, we have to deal with that gap. And so that's it's a little problem. But because AI Cure had these data, you're able to at least do something about it with these 4. So my perspective is strictly CNS. I've used this technology in the past for ADHD. I plan to use it in the future for smoking cessation and other forms of substance abuse. These populations don't adhere very well. They're not that compliant. So any sort of technology that we can bring to the table to improve the situation, in my mind, would be well worth it. Because you can have a great protocol, but it doesn't matter if they don't take their medicine. It works in all sorts of areas. It's not, I look at it from the perspective of CNS, but this firm has used it for infectious disease, stroke, or post-stroke, all sorts of areas. So I don't think it's necessarily limited to CNS. But because of the small signal size, small effect size, we're more at risk for missing the signal in our world. So that's one of the reasons why you have more trials fail in CNS. So there's one more poll here. So please take a look at that. All right. So you've got the contact information for Adam. If I can answer any questions, you could ask me, but.
So I have a question.
Sure.
So it looks like AI Cure works really well, at least the technology is adapted towards pills or tablets, but how, have you used it for other things like topical applications?
Adam, you want to take that?
Yeah, we've developed a technology that can automate the observation of any type of administration, although we've started with oral medications and sublinguals. Early next year, we'll be launching injectables and moving into inhalables. However, there are many sponsors approaching us to look at all forms of administration, including topicals. So we are open to commercial partnerships with sponsors if there are specific applications that they want to develop jointly with us.
Thank you. Anna Battaglia from Allergan. Just wanted to ask if you saw an increase in the placebo response, or is there an impact on these CNS trials?
So we had we did not have a strong placebo response in our trial. So we had certainly some, but it was the difference between placebo and the active that, of course, we were looking for. So basically, we didn't see a lot of impact on. Certainly didn't see excessive placebo response.
Do you envision any potential approval to come with the device together, product and the device?
It's hard for me to say because our program is not advanced enough. So I think, yeah, go ahead. Adam, help answer that.
So the technology does not impact labeling in any way. To date, we're not aware of any form of technology medication combination that requires labeling to be affected. And the FDA views this almost like a non-self-reported form of patient monitoring. So in the same way that electronic patient diaries or pill bottles or actually coming into the clinic more often doesn't impact labeling, neither does this.